once again, I'd like to welcome you and thank you very much for joining our Sunday service for for April 19th. Um, the last time I officiated the Sunday service, I think, was March 29th, which was 3 weeks ago. And since that time, I've basically just been here. Well, not exactly right here in this seat, but in the general vicinity of the seat. But it's really good to touch base with you again today. And I know we're all missing seeing each other in person at the temple. And actually, I think when you logged on today to the temple's Facebook page, I'm sure you probably saw the junior YBAs. They created a really nice card, "We Miss You All" card. It's on the Facebook page, but you know, um, I think it says, "We miss you all." Actually, each of the juniors is holding a word, right? So, "We miss you all. Stay safe and see you soon." So, in case you haven't seen it, please check it out on our Facebook page. But um, so hopefully, in the not too distant future, we'll be able to reopen the temple, and it will really be great, to come together again. As long as we stay at least 6 feet apart. But meanwhile, we're going to continue our, live streaming here on Facebook. And so, I think some of our first attempt at live streaming was back on March 15th, I believe, was the spring Ohigan service. And at that time, we streamed it on Zoom. And I think that went pretty well. But, there are certain advantages to Facebook. And I think someone suggested that we check out streaming on Facebook. And so I looked into it. But when I first looked into it, I was thinking it was going to be difficult because I think the one or two, how-to videos that I'd seen seemed to say that we needed, additional software besides the browser. We needed additional software. But then I remember having this conversation with one of our junior YBA high school students, Lindsay, which I'm sure all of you know. This is right before the temple closed down, so Lindsay happened to be in the office because actually her school had already closed. And I mentioned to Lindsay that I thought it was going to be difficult to go. It was going to be difficult to go live on Facebook. And then I remember Lindsay looking at me with a kind of, "What are you talking about?" kind of look. And she said, "We do it all the time at concerts and stuff from our phones." And so I looked into it again, with that encouragement. And sure enough, she was right. You can actually live stream without any additional stuff. You can do it with additional stuff, or you can do it without it. But so anyway, I wanted to give a shout out to Lindsay and thank her for setting me straight. Actually, I think we all thank her because um, she kind of was the one who spurred that initial attempt to stream on Facebook, which we've now been doing for, I guess, 4 months now. So 4 weeks rather. So once again, thank you, Lindsay. So let me give a short Dharma talk here. I think as we all know, the news today is all mostly about the very heavy toll that this coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic is inflicting on so many people. And in fact, something that's pretty close to home for me was hearing just yesterday that the Garden Crest Rehabilitation Center, this is a nursing home in the Echo Park area, and I visited many times, now has apparently 70 cases of COVID-19 amongst its staff and residents. 70 cases amongst its staff and residents, and that really shocked me. And I think I'll try. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to speak to any of the residents there, but I like to call them and maybe touch base with them because actually I know some of the ladies there that I've been visiting there since 2014 on behalf of the Los Angeles Buddhist Temple Federation. So I actually know some of the ladies there, and actually I was just there in January and I was there in December, so I visited twice pretty recently. So that's very shocking and very close to home. Um, But my other observation is that there, at the same time that there are these disturbing stories and really sad stories, there's also always positive stories, right? People, going out of their way to help each other. And I'm sure you've seen the reports of the massive distribution efforts, distributing food to people who many of whom recently lost their jobs, and so they need to find a way to put food on the table. And then there's also many stories of people um, stepping up to either donate or to make the face masks and other protective equipment that our healthcare workers need. So um, this kind of phenomenon that we're seeing, along with the disturbing news, is sort of positive, this sort of manifestation of altruism, is kind of what I'd like to look into today in my talk. Um, we've seen this kind of widespread altruism before in our society, and I think you'd agree with me that on the one hand, it's just it, it's a natural human response to our encounters, with what we call impermanence in Buddhism. You know, the challenges that we encounter in times of crisis. Um, but I think what stands out um, in this current crisis is how unprepared we seem to have been, right, for this pandemic. Um, and then it's of course basically turned all of our lives upside down. The sort of scope of its effect throughout all of society and actually all of the world is really unprecedented. And I think it's not necessarily, so when we talk about impermanence, it's not necessarily the experience of impermanence itself, a constant change, that's so unnerving to us. Um, I mean, on the one hand, like every morning, I get up and you know, when I look at my head, my hair, there's definitely fewer hairs up there, and then the ones that are still there are definitely whiter. So, I feel like I can say that, by now, I'm quite familiar with the concept of constant change, so, but, what I think what has caught us off guard in the case of this, pandemic, is as I was kind of hinting at, is the extent of the disruption, was really, totally unexpected, I think. And so, in other words, not only is reality, a constant flow uh, of change, but within this flow, the details of the specific details of the change is are quite unpredictable. Each time that the change happens, it's different and very unpredictable. And so, generally speaking, we humans, we don't like unpredictability, of course, and so that's why it's very difficult to deal with. Um, and then and now looking a little deeper, into this phenomenon, I think what makes dealing with impermanence especially difficult for us is that our sense of being in control, our sense of being in control of a situation, is challenged. And so one of the examples of this is the effect that the current mandate to stay at home is having on us. Of course we're all social beings. We enjoy having get-togethers with our family and friends, but now maybe with the exception of our immediate family members who were able to who we're living with, um, with that exception, all of our opportunities for social interaction basically have been taken away from us, and we've all been told to stay at home and be socially distant. And so naturally, this has caused our appreciation of the friendships that we have to increase. We miss our friendships. I think this was, sort of evidenced or manifested. It was sort of expressed by that junior YBA card, where they're missing seeing us, and we're certainly missing seeing them, and they're probably missing seeing each other, because of the stay-at-home mandate. And then, when we hear about the widespread difficulties that people are having, just putting food on the table, or about, as I mentioned, our healthcare providers, lacking the personal protective equipment that they need to safely take care of the sick, then many people are quick, to spring into action to help in whatever way they can. And as I said, this is the natural altruistic human response to help people because of the reality of impermanence. There are these people that are in need. But I wanted to go a little deeper into it and say that I think there's a way in which the teaching of impermanence, or the experience of impermanence, can actually also be considered to be a benefit to us. And I think understanding impermanence doesn't mean that we simply just accept the reality of constant change. I think most of us can accept that. I mean, even a young child can accept the reality of change, and the loss of a pet, or something like that. So I think there's a deeper benefit, though, that comes, I guess, if we can understand why. Why do we tend to have this difficulty with impermanence in the first place? So as I mentioned earlier, we have difficulty because, when things do not go the way that we wanted them to, our sense of being in control, our sense of self-power is challenged. And, I don't think any of us would deny, for example, that the current, coronavirus pandemic is challenging our sense of control, our sense of self-control. And so in this sense, when our sense of self-control is challenged, or to use a stronger word, negated even, this results in breaking down the usual distinctions that we or that our egos create or make between ourselves and others. In other words, when our sense of self-power or self-control is challenged or negated, this has a tendency to break down the separation that we think exists between ourselves and others. Basically, anytime we seriously question our usual self-centered views, the distinctions, or we could say barriers, between ourselves and others are diminished. And in clearly seeing, why we tend to resist change and unpredictability during our encounters with impermanence, in other words, because of our ego, our sense of separation, right? When in seeing that, we can be positively changed or transformed by impermanence. And when that happens, our awareness of and our sensitivity to those around us is heightened. And so this is sort of like what teachers like Dr. Netta talk about, the two aspects of impermanence. One is negative in that it tends to challenge our sense of self-control, our sense of self-power, and the other is positive in the sense that when that sense of self is challenged, simultaneously our awareness and appreciation of everything around us is heightened. I could put it another way and say that because of the way that impermanence challenges us, according to the Buddha, we are made to see the self as it really is. In other words, we're not so in control after all, and we're not so independent. And then, as the Buddha often said, with the illusion of the ego self, this illusion of the ego self out of the way, we can begin to glimpse the infinitely greater big picture beyond the self. And I think maybe this is what we're all experiencing. This is what we're all, in fact, realizing in this pandemic, when we look around and see that it's not just us, but everyone that's having a hard time, everyone that's finding the situation difficult. And in realizing this, something opens up within us. Some kind of connection, arises between us and others. But maybe the most important point that I want to make is that the Buddha taught that this connection or this interconnection um, has actually always been there. It's always been there. But only now, with our experience of impermanence, are we able to appreciate it. I think this is my understanding of the way that impermanence can actually be a positive thing in our life, a positive power in our life. Well, so I want to conclude my talk, but I want to end by sharing I wanted to discuss actually a short video clip that I found on the internet recently. So as all of you know, I had big plans to present a Buddhism and Star Wars seminar in March, and unfortunately it had to be postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. And yes, I am feeling very sorry for myself right now. So, but so in preparing for that seminar, of course I studied the sequel trilogy movies myself. I watched them many times actually, or parts of them many times, and I've watched many YouTube commentaries on these movies. I'm pretty sure probably most of you are aware that in terms of the three Star Wars sequel trilogy movies, that would be The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. Both the fan and critics' response to these movies has been extremely divided, and maybe not for The Force Awakens, but certainly for the last two has been divided. In some cases, it's actually negative. And But personally, I think that the three movies work very well together, and each has very powerful and memorable scenes, which I will present someday in my seminar. But I think that the key to seeing these movies is not from the viewpoint of whether or not my expectations were met or not, which is actually the way that many of the YouTube commentaries, that's their point of view, is I don't like this because what I expected to happen didn't happen, or I love this because what I expected to happen did happen. Not from that point of view, but rather from the context of the Buddha's teachings. This is how I'm looking at it. And so when you look at the movies that way, I think they link together very well, very powerfully actually. Or I could say from the context of the Buddha's teachings, or from the context of the Force, which is very parallel to, in many ways, to the Buddha's teaching. But especially, as I said, in the case of the last two movies of the sequel trilogy, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, there are a surprising number of YouTube commentaries that are not only negative but actually angry. I won't get into why, but I think it's true that of all the movie franchises out there, the Star Wars franchise has some of the most passionate and outspoken fans. I would say not just passionate, but sometimes actually verging on self-righteousness. Actually, I guess if you've been following a franchise for 40 years, and it doesn't fulfill your expectations, I don't think you have a right to be angry. But there's obviously, that explains why there is a lot of anger out there. In fact, I was thinking maybe my seminar should not be on the Star Wars movies, but on the Star Wars fans. I think that that would actually be maybe even more Buddhistic. But anyway, so in doing the research, I came across this video by this young man named Alex, who runs this YouTube channel called Star Wars Explained. Star Wars Explained. And it really caught my attention because he's a diehard Star Wars fan. But he's also someone who clearly has this awareness of the bigger picture that I've been talking about today. His video offers helpful tips on this current necessity we have of what he calls self-isolating or social distancing. He has some tips on how to deal with this, and the clips. The sort of segments that he uses in his clips are from the 9 films of the Star Wars saga. This is the prequel trilogy, the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. And then also some clips from the Star Wars animated films, which I personally am not familiar with, but from all these films. And so I think, the reason why I was going to share it with you is because Alex's video is another example of how our experience of impermanence has a way of sort of opening us up to the bigger picture, or opening us up to our bigger picture, our shared bigger picture. And I'm pretty sure, Alex, is someone who has realized that we're all in this, this crisis together. And so this awareness of the interrelatedness of all of our lives is what I think prompted him to make this video. I think he was probably thinking something like, how can I make something that cheers people up? So I was going to show it to you, but I reached out to Alex on his at his email and also on his Facebook page, and I haven't heard back from him yet. So I'm not going to show it because I wanted to get his permission to show it on to include it in my talk today. So I will not show it. But at the end of this talk, at the end of our service, I will give you the directions to find it. It's very easy to find because it's on his YouTube channel, and don't worry. I highly recommend that you watch it because you won't be disappointed. But anyway, so let me give my concluding material here. I'll give you the directions to his Star Wars Explained YouTube channel at the end of the service. But I'm sure you'll enjoy watching his video, whether or not you're a Star Wars fan. But if you are a Star Wars fan and if you have seen most of the 9 movies, I think you'll find his video hilarious. The way that it sort of recontextualizes some key scenes from the Star Wars movies. So, in concluding my talk, and I just like to say that until next week, please, stay safe, and I'll give you some advice from Alex that he shared in his video. Stay inside. Wear a face mask that's breathable. Be courteous at the grocery store. Explore new hobbies. Try to stay in physical shape. Put on your fancy robes. Bathe regularly. Explore virtual ways to stay connected. Do not shake hands. And most of all, try to stay positive. Namo Davos, Namo Davos, Namo Davos. So that's our service for today. That's my talk for today. And I think, let me see, are there any comments here? Good morning, everyone. Oh, yes, Cindy saying, please have a Star Wars and Buddhism seminar. I will, definitely. If I depending on how long it takes us to get the temple opened again, I may just do this online, do the Star Wars seminar online, via probably Zoom, so we can do it that way too. Okay, good morning, good morning, good morning. Any comments or questions? And meanwhile, as far as announcements, the temple remains closed. And we're in a wait and see mode. I think we had stated that May 17th or May 15th we would reopen the temple, and that would be in time for the Tanjoi service in May. But I think recently we may not open the temple by then. It just depends on how things progress. But for sure, next 26, and the April, I also get some coffee and Dharma, and we'll be having our monthly coffee and Dharma discussion at 9 a.m. before the service. I think most of you will have received an invitation to that. This Sunday this next Sunday coffee and Dharma discussion will be hosted by Anna Nakano Sanchez, and also, before then, this coming Wednesday, I believe, this coming Wednesday, April 22nd, my Wednesday night study class is still continuing, but of course it's meeting all online now. So we still have some class classes that are meeting, which is the Wednesday night study class, but it's completely online. But certainly, all of us at Higashi Honganji, hope you and your loved ones, are staying safe and managing as best you can during this crisis, and we hope to see you as soon as possible. Let's see, I don't see any other messages here, so if you please join me in Ondoku-san 2. Oops. Embraced by Amida's great compassion, I respond with gratitude, dedicating my life. Embraced by my dear teachers and dear Dharma friends, I must answer gratefully throughout my life. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Okay, thank you, Penny. Thank you, Tom. Oh, thank you, Tina. Wednesday is Earth Day, yes. So maybe that's what we'll talk about during the Wednesday night study class. Earth Day. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, so before we go, let me give you the directions to that video. So promise me that you will check this video out. You won't be disappointed. So you just go to your web, in your web browser, go to youtube.com, and in youtube.com's search, bar, type in Star Wars Explained, S-T-A-R space, W-A-R-S space, Explained, and then, press enter. And then in the search results, you're going to want to click on the circular yellow icon. There's a yellow icon that says Star Wars Explained. This is Alex's YouTube channel. Click on that. And then on his page, on his YouTube channel, I'm not sure. It depends on whether you're on your phone or your iPad or on your computer. But you should be able to. There's a red subscribe button, and under that red subscribe button, there should be a search, box there, which is usually a magnifying glass. And if there is, then click on that search bar and then type in on Alex's YouTube channel page, isolation, I-S-O-L-A-T-I-O-N, and then press return. And you'll see his video, which is called Self-Isolation Tips from Star Wars, with the subheading, We're All Stuck Inside. Let the Jedi Masters and other exiled, lonely characters of Star Wars teach you how to survive. If you don't see the search bar when you get to his page, then if you just scroll down on his Star Wars Explained YouTube channel, It's down there. You'll find this video called Self-Isolation Tips from Star Wars. And if you have trouble finding it, then just email me. Most of you have my email address. Email me and I'll send you a direct link to it. But anyway, I hope that you'll definitely check the video out now that the service is over, and I think you'll enjoy it. And let's see. I think that's it for today. So thank you very much for joining us in our Sunday service, and please join me in Gasho one more time. Namo Midabutsu. Namo Midabutsu. Thank you. See you soon.